Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode, I feature Peruvian-born American artist Grimanesa Amorós. She is an interdisciplinary artist with interests in the fields of social history, scientific research, and critical theory, creating site-specific monumental sculptures. She harnesses the medium of light to create sculptures that engage visitors in contemplation of their cultural heritage, community, and relationship to technology. Drawing upon critical cultural legacies and landscapes, she is inspired by the communities she creates within. Installing and programming each piece on site, direct interaction with the surrounding architecture is key to creating her work. Grimanesa has projects and exhibitions throughout the United States, in Peru, Spain, Chile, Italy, France, Switzerland, Cuba, and many other countries. She has been a guest lecturer nationally and internationally, and she was a guest speaker at TED Global 2014 and as part of the Art and Embassies Program of the United States. Enjoy this episode featuring fascinating artist Grimanesa Amorós. Grimanesa, welcome to my podcast. I'm delighted to feature you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I truly appreciate this and I can't wait to start sharing.
Thank you. Let's dive in with you sharing with us when you discovered your artistic passion.
Well, that was many, many years ago. I think I might have been at least maybe 11 years old. And I started because my love and curiosity about maps. I truly enjoyed remaking them, constantly drawing, the distances that I had from, here, one point to there, and making and marking the continental shapes as well. And so because of my fascination with them, my mother put me in drawing classes. And it was through that my career, I would think, as an artist began. I started learning oil, paint, how to use brushes, how to mix colors. And that's what it was. That's when I started it.
Do you recall if there was an artist early on that really influenced you, or even a work of art you were really drawn to as a youngster?
I think as a youngster, I started probably because it was perhaps a little much easier to understand nature because it was quite visual. And I am originally from Peru. And at that time, we truly didn't have museums that we could have gone. So most of the artwork that I learned art history was through books, but that came a little bit later. So I think I was getting inspired by a lot of mountains and oceans because that's what I had available to me.
That's lovely. And how would you define your practice? Let's talk about your work. Let's go into detail.
Well, I think that in my case, it has been an evolution through life. I always have been traveling. So I would say traveling, my curiosity for materials, observing new technologies, architecture. I think I could summarize it to all of these things that I have just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And when did you begin creating site-specific installations and working with light?
I think I started when I truly started feeling a requirement to communicate with humanity in general. And I thought that if I will do site-specific, then it might also be public. And I thought that the walls of a gallery, they were a little bit constrained to me. And I think that came parallel with my love for architecture. And it was always quite important for me from the start that the artwork, the viewer, and the architecture becomes one. So that's how I started it.
And what do you enjoy most about the work you do?
Oh, basically the whole part, everything. From the beginning, I enjoyed all the way to the end. If I didn't enjoy what I did, I think I could not be able to feel creative.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I see one of your goals is to bridge cultures with light. Can you build upon that? Share those thoughts with us?
Sure, because light is a medium, right? It's ephemeral, but it's also a medium that communicates and is understood by everyone. So I always had a dream that it's interesting to know about different cultures around the world, yet that gives us the opportunity to be open, but we don't do it enough. So I think that if we have a little more flexibility to adapt, and I think that that could be done through light because it involves us all, embraces us all, right? Light at the same time is energy. It's a perception which all us as humans we have. So if we could be a little more aware, I think that we will be able to become more focused in things that we have around, or even on a daily basis, even when we start walking, the streets. So I think that light will embrace people from all different cultures. That doesn't matter if they are, for example, from China, Middle East, or here from New York, right? If you are in a room sharing the same light, then you have a common denominator. And that is a melting pot that immediately brings understanding, in my opinion.
And when do you know when a sculpture is finished?
That's very intuitive. I think that basically when Grimanesa has put 100% into the work and there's nothing more that I could do, then you have to let the baby go.
And what's your process of choosing colors?
I think that the process is quite site-specific too as well. It becomes much later. At the beginning, depending on the size of the sculpture, I could be anywhere from 1 week to 3 weeks or perhaps a month. And while I'm there, I'm able to experience, sunrise, sunsets, how it does changes according to perhaps the latitude where the country is located geographically. So that changes constantly depending where I'm installing. And I tend to respond because, for example, the sunsets in Riyadh, they were quite very different to other sunsets that I have seen, in the past. Because Riyadh, for example, is a city that is in the middle of the desert. So while you are appreciating the sunset, the whole sun, but it still is kind of like with sun, correct? On the air, because there's, the wind just brings the sandstorms, and sometimes it could be, much more harsh than others, but there's always wind that brings the sun constantly. So that makes you have like a filter about how you actually seeing that sunset. So that all helps me to be able to choose the colors that I'm going to be utilizing in that installation, in that piece of artwork.
That's fascinating. And so when you're in your studio and you're working and you're creating, right? Mm-hmm. Do you listen to music?
No, I used to in the past. When I was younger, I used to use a lot of music and I was really up to date. But now I prefer silence. It truly gives me the space to focus and think clearly.
Mm-hmm. And if you weren't an artist, what other career path do you think you would have chosen?
I think that I was very lucky because I have always known what I wanted to do in life. So I truly could not imagine being anything else. It is a part of my essence. So even when I was younger and I received a lot of rejection letters, I would try to pass them like a pages of a book because I said, okay, this is it, Grimanesa. This is all what you could do. So might as well keep on. You have to be persevering.
That's great. How do you keep learning?
I'm just a very flexible, open-minded individual. And I am very sensitive to my everyday. And I always say that I'm always an empty vessel that I always love. I have this thirst for learning and curiosity. So it's just innate. Keep learning, very natural. I don't even realize how that happens, but I feel that there's so much in the world that is an unknown for us. So I always like to refer as my learning as romance with the unknown.
Interesting. I want to ask you about the titles of your work. How do you title your sculptures, or how you describe your sculptures?
Well, it comes from the beginning. Basically, interestingly enough, the title comes first. Since I was younger, I never felt that I liked the word untitled. And it actually bugs me. And when I would go to museums or exhibitions, and I would say untitled, 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 or number 1, number 2, number 3. So I thought that it was a very quick way of not addressing what you as an artist were doing. But it's respectful, because imagine how boring would be the world if we all would think the same way. So in my case, actually, the title is very thoughtful. I truly sit down and I start thinking first. When they send me all the plans and the image, sometimes I have to actually do site visits myself. So I come back to the studio and I start thinking about what will be the title for this exhibition. And then once I choose the title, then I start writing, right? Basically what we call an artist statement, which is, yes, it could be just a couple of liners, from the beginning, perhaps even 2 liners. And then I start. And it's basically, there's a lot of research that I will do about perhaps the community that lives around that space, the architecture, the building itself, about when perhaps was built, the architect that built it. And then all of that information starts giving you the knowledge and the nutrients for me to be able to understand what is that I would like to communicate with the people, individuals that will be attending the exhibition or seeing the piece publicly. So titles have been always very important. I tend to be inspired by Latin titles. And I guess that's because I was born in Peru and my mother tongue is Spanish. And obviously the Spanish came, from Latin. So it had always attracted me.
So knowing who your audience is plays a major part in your creativity.
Yes, because I have a lot of sensibility for humanity. I always think that it's my contribution. I wanted to be, like Mother Teresa, we were talking about so many years ago. And then a friend of mine that was in my studio said, Grimanesa, you have to come up with your own parts about how you want to relate and perhaps make humanity think. You are not Mother Teresa, you like to drink your wine, you like your shoes, you like so many other things, so you will never be able to live like Mother Teresa. So you have to find your own voice and who you are as an individual. And, I still have all these pictures of Mother Teresa, here in my studio, because I thought that she was amazing. But in reality, of course, that stopped me and made me think about really what was my role as an artist and in this society that we live, which was great.
Do you think the audience understands your work?
Well, because I'm very thoughtful, I don't truly put emphasis in the audience to understand the work. Mm-hmm. But what it is important for me is to make them think. Some might like it, some might they don't, but there always will be something there for them to take away from it. So the work that I make, I know that they will make them stop at least for a couple of seconds. And those seconds are already very precious to me. So by that, I think that perhaps they could become more inspired, and that inspiration that they're taking away from the work will make them more creative in their own work. And that could be also in finance. People in business needs to be creative as well, different areas. So that's really what I want. And that's really my role that I think I have as an artist.
What does your studio feel like? What does it look like?
Well, I love to have a balanced life. And so I think that the studio is quite peaceful, even though I have other people working, with me on a daily basis. I think we all work joyfully. That perhaps could be because I'm extremely organized and I somehow love a structure, because when you have a structure, a base, then you could be able to construct. I mean, it works in my case, right? So I think it's very peaceful, yeah, and always smells very delicious.
Ah, yes. What would you say have been the most substantial challenges that you faced as an artist?
I think that what I mentioned before about romance with the unknown. A lot of the work that I do is in different countries and different cultures, and they all have different ways of working. My work is also very collaborative, and that you have to learn how to work with other, not only for people, but with the culture that they are living, right? When you work in China, is one way. When you work in India, they have other ways of doing all this, schedules. So I think that that's very exciting and challenging. And I try myself to prepare to the best of my capacity for each installation before I do it. But there's always things that, happen that you don't know. For example, I remember in La Habana, it's important to go with a plan A and B. But then thankfully in Habana, I have like an A, B, C, and D. So you have to be prepared. And I'm going to share this story that what happened in La Habana was that the day of the opening was a public work in the Malecon in a landmark building, very important building, and it was all the facade. So it was 7:00 and I was talking, to the public. It's supposed the light got supposedly on, but nothing was happening. And obviously I was talking quite longer than I should. And then my project manager comes in the ear and says, and nothing is working.
Ouch.
Like simply as that. And then I said, okay. And I keep on, of course, trying to talk because it's a lot of people there in the streets, right? And so he said, and I told him immediately with what my choice is. And he said, well, and the reason why it didn't work is because they had sprayed cement and the wires got cemented. Simple as that. So I said, well, the choice is that we have to disconnect them from all our electrical equipment that is, well protected, and connect them to theirs. And I said, okay, that will work. Yes. And I said, well, everything might explode and it would be all blown up, basically, right? Mm. So in other words, the equipment could be fried. And I said, okay. So I remember clearly, I said, nothing is working now, right? So we don't have nothing to lose. So why don't we take the chance and just do it? Like the damn thing, excuse me, my language, but that's exactly, you imagine myself, him talking in my ear, right? It's like you were in a lecture hall and then the public is in front waiting. So I keep on talking a little bit further. And then suddenly people, I didn't look because I was obviously my back towards it and then I hear the people says, wow. And so imagine I felt the relief that I felt. So everything worked out. And that's what I always use, romance with the unknown. But, like that, of course, I have a couple, of episodes that they have happened, throughout my installations, through the years, right?
Yes. And that's so interesting. Wow. So in regard to technology, it's clear that you embrace technology. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a point where you were intimidated by it?
No, absolutely not. I love it. And basically the technology depends on the project. I don't necessarily use the same technologies for each project. So it's a conglomeration of everything. I go back to what I said before, that I first like to learn about the zone and historical background, especially when it's going to be a site specific, right? That really comes, all united in one. So because the technology is a now, but I'm also fascinated how the past affects our present and the future. And I mention this because it also is going to depend in that installation is going to be permanent or it's going to be just temporary. And if it's temporary, it depends, is it going to be there a month or is it going to be 6 months or 3 years, right? So there's a list of, ideas and a lot of initial even sketches as to which are the technologies that I'm going to be using. And that is all help also with renderings and video renderings. And I think that that's also part of our research that I do from the beginning that I mentioned before. And I love that part because, like we mentioned, I keep learning. And you have to adapt to all the different technologies that they are on the market, but which one of these is going to work specifically for determined project.
So share with us, what are you excited about now?
What I'm excited, I'm excited because I'm working with an opera and to do a site-specific project with an opera house. The challenges that it brings to you. There is not only the director of the opera that you have to be collaborating, but it also is the actors and then the singers. And then there is the scenography that they are thinking that for, the story, the costumes, the architecture part of the theater, how they move. So that to me, it's something new I have never done. And I'm, truly looking forward.
Yeah. Whoa. That's deep. Oof, a lot of moving parts there, right?
Yes. And that's the challenging part of it. The collaboration part is also very exciting. I love to work with others.
Yeah. This has been a very interesting and informative conversation. I appreciate you sharing what you've shared. And this is our final question. And that is, what do you feel is the purpose of art? And as an artist, what is your role?
I think it's important to make them think and activate people, inspire them, to be more creative. At the end, that's very essential and that becomes universal. That doesn't going to be growing all on you. So that is very important to me, to make you think. So I don't want to impose my own ideas, but what questions they're going to bring into your life when you see a work of mine.
Well, thank you so much for the work you do. It's definitely uplifting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. There's so much things that these several women talks, they really help others, to make you think. And I like how, precise and, to the point they are. So this way helps other people in their own practices as well, right?
Yes.
Like a question that you talk about, what do your workspace look and I feel like? I had to say that most of your questions, they never asked me before, which makes me think, right? I'm actually here now. And I think the studio is very precise and very clean. I like my workspace organized. It really helps me to stay focused and clear-headed. And I never thought about that before. I'm looking at it as I'm, just sharing this with you. So it's very interesting. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. I'm very curious. That's why I asked those questions. Because, yes, your studio looks a certain way, right? That's easy. That's the easy part. But how does it feel, right?
Exactly. And it's important because, Phyllis, if I am not precisely organized as I have described my studio before, then believe it or not, I can think, I cannot move forward. It's something, very, rare, I guess, but it all makes me feel very comfortable. And that ties it up what we discussed about when you're creating. Do you think about your audiences? Like when I'm here, I'm thinking about how I have to feel a certain way to do things. And, I think that the feeling of making an impact makes people think beyond the expected, I think. Communication with others, especially, I think, with visual, pushes people to react. Sometimes, I guess, positively, sometimes not. But it truly drives me to continue to develop and grow in my work.
Well, thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. I always said I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity and then I have work.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.